Hello and welcome to the Into the Unknown podcast. My name is Michael Jeffrey. This is my co-host Scott East, and today we have our first guest, who happens to be my boyfriend. This is Terry Sidiou, who is a meditation teacher and an author and a life coach and many other things. And with that skill set, he's going to lead us in a little centering exercise to start our podcast today. Take it away, Terry.
Okay. All right. If everyone wants to close their eyes, I'm just going to play some light music in the background. And all I want you to do is just to start breathing. Inhale and exhale through your nose with conscious control. Inhale and exhale with conscious control. So through your nose. Now, the importance of breathing with conscious control, of breathing consciously, is that you enter what we call the control state. So an intention that I offer a lot of my clients are trying to locate their control is you could only breathe one way. You are only allowed to breathe one way for the rest of your life. How would you breathe? Would it be a short breath? Would it be a long, deep breath? Would it be a gentle state of flow? Find your control breath, and you will find your control state. Take a minute, set the frequency and pace of your breath. Returning your focus back to breath. The critical reason why I'm find and locate your control breath. Now that you have your control breath, I'm going to teach you a little exercise that'll keep your mind calm and in control. Whenever you find yourself wandering into a thought or a feeling, or experience something with your 5 physical senses that isn't serving or enlightening you, that isn't useful, that isn't restricting you from living your truth, you replace that thought, feeling, emotion, or sensation with this breath. You return to your control state. And only until your control state has been restored do you continue moving forward in life. The pace of your breath, the frequency, the vibrational frequency of your breath, that's the course for your life. If you lose control of breath, guess what? You lose control of life. All it takes. When you're grocery shopping, practice conscious breathing. When you're sitting in traffic, practice conscious breathing. When you're nervous, when you're scared, when you're unsure, when you feel doubt, return to your controlled breath, Restore your control state and move forward accordingly. Let the frequency of your breath dictate the pace of your life. Take a deep inhale and exhale through your nose. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Well, we got you. What's the sound? Oh, we have it.
Still good. Okay, so on Into the Unknown podcast today, we're going to jump into the unknown with 3 men instead of our usual 2. So I'm just feeling curious about what's going to emerge. I'm curious what's alive for you over there, where you're sitting on that linoleum floor there, Scott.
Yeah, in the meditation, I was contemplating how there seem to be like 2 different ways I can experience life. I can and they might not be different, but right now they're different for me. The where I'm rolling on the waves. I'm feeling each wave like fully and completely, sort of tossing back and forth in the passion of life, and then the where I went to with this meditation is a sort of steadiness, a stillness. What's the word? It's like a consistency, something like that.
Which one did you prefer?
I think I preferred the consistency when I got into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then another part of me is I have this open question of so can there be like a conscious, like valuable purpose to both, sort of like if I regard them both as like modes of exploration, you know? And it's just an open question right now.
Well, the way I see it is, think of that stillness as your way to restore balance when you're flopping through the waves, because sometimes the waves can consume you, right? I mean, that's even just this experience with Michael that I'm having. It sometimes feels like this wave, I'm about to crash, and then like, okay, I need to get steady on my surfboard here. And I think that's the beauty of life, is that you can consciously relinquish control whenever you want, so long as you consciously know how to regain control when you need to. I mean, we all have those fears, those doubts, those uncertainties. But when they crop up, you can just take a moment out of them and just to study them, realize why they're there. And usually 9 times out of 10, I always find it's because just lack of attention, overpacing, taking the body too far, taking the mind too far, losing sight. And so you bring yourself back to your control state, balance yourself, and then catch the next wave when it comes.
You referred to like this is like this experience with Michael right now, and I'm not really filled in on what you're talking about, or nor are the listeners. Is this something you've wanted for?
So, how long have we been seeing each other now?
6 weeks. Maybe.
6 weeks? I think it's longer than 6 weeks. A few months. No, 2 months. Maybe 2 months. 8 weeks, maybe. but we both never dated a guy before. We're both kind of dropping into this queer experience a little bit more formally. And so there's a lot of newness, and there's a lot of relinquishing of thought and feeling just to be present in the experience. Within itself is a meditation, just to be in it and then take a moment out of it to study what am I in. And shadowing and breaking away from old stigmas, old beliefs, old restricted beliefs that were constructed for us. But then we look at what it is in the present moment, and we look at the potential of it, how it can inspire, how it can inspire us, inspire others. I mean, we both come from very different cultural backgrounds too, very different upbringings, which we're realizing, and the conversations we're having are about that mostly, is how simple and straightforward and how easy it feels being in it, despite all the variety and differences that we come from or stem from. How do we attain that on a global scale? I mean, we don't want the whole world fucking each other, but you know, I'm talking more about that sense of just being with each other and just existing in each other's presence without any fear or any sense of belonging to anything other than just the here and now. Ideas, gents.
Yeah, I've been curious, like, where the generative edge is with like conflict and tension. Like, it's nice to coexist with indifferences in a way that's generative, and it's like there has to be also a level of like discomfort or like conflict often for things to be generative in a way. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but there's something of a value set. Like, you're sort of like, what if the whole world was existing in some sort of peace and harmony? And I've been pondering, like, if that's even realistic or ideal, or like how nature is. Like, like I've been watching a lot of these vaccine conversations, especially in social media in Nelson. Maybe this is going on everywhere, but there is such a tribalized, like, trying to get people onto your side and just like attack and everyone's wrong. And then there's this like frustration that I'm seeing in some threads of how people are annoyed at how everyone's othering, and like we just need to build bridges. And I'm wondering if there's like this something lacking in both conversations of like othering people for othering others is just another form of othering. And like the truth is humans other others as a sort of thing that humans do. Like, we grew up in, or we developed, we matured within tribes, and that like there's a sort of safety and security and like efficiency. Like, we don't have the bandwidth to understand everybody's opinion all the time. Like, there's a sort of heuristical like slowing down and existing within what's possible just to tribalize. So I think there's a thing to like, we need to just acknowledge and accept that disharmony exists in order to like have a higher level of harmony.
I mean, it's written into all the ancient scriptures I read. It was that whole sense of destroying one paradigm to allow the other one to emerge, like breaking bones so that they grow stronger, entering conflict so you can break those rigid belief systems that restrict societies and communities. I mean, there's definitely extreme versions of that too. And I think it's important that we don't destroy and replace, but we destroy and compromise and evolve from that. Like, a merger has to occur. It can't be destroy and replace it with this thing, because there's a knowledge and wisdom that came about from the existing belief system that was at play. Like, even you've got these two sides of the COVID debate, these really two extremes, the vax, the non-vax, the conspiracies, the realities, the different kind of components that are coming together. How can we get these two parties to resolve to coexist in a world that is one again? You know, we're going to have to build a wall in the middle of the entire world now for one side and the other side? How can we have that conversation? What needs to break? and I think it's a common thing on both sides needs to break in order for it to heal and come back together. And I'm always curious as to that one thing, what that one thing could be.
I've got some ideas about that. I'm not sure if it's like, does the break need to happen? Like, is the destruction inherent, or is this sort of like including what's there, but acknowledging maybe a higher level that includes? So there's one thought is like, maybe it's not about like breaking one paradigm to create a new paradigm. It's about like the new paradigm can absorb the previous paradigm. That's one thought. The other thought is like, at the core, I think is like values. Like, look at both sides of this vaccine debate, for instance, is like, I think a lot of it comes down to safety and security on both sides. Like if I'm vaccinated, I want to like feel safe and secure. I want to keep my community from getting sick. I want me from getting sick. Like it's a lot of this like safe and secure in my body. And from the non-vax side, it's like, well, I don't want to put this thing that is untested, like could have long-term health effects on my body and my family and my offspring, and who knows what could happen. Like I feel safer without it. So it's like at the core, it's like there's the same value. It's just how we approach the value is very different. Anyway, so that's my pondering. Is like maybe it's not about action. Like right action is totally related to the value that's at the center that's guiding the action. And maybe that's part of the moving into the next paradigm, next culture. Like the evolution is coming to acknowledge the common value at the core and how to navigate into that together.
I propose that there's something about the like a software shift, inner software shift, or inner just like this fine details sort of at the DNA level, like shift. It's not about like, hey, let's create this one belief that everyone can kind of get behind, and then all hold this banner together that states this one belief. Like it's not about, hey, let's get everybody on the tear everything down train or keep everything up train, which I see to be a major, like an underlying pattern. Like there are like more conservative types, we might call them conservative, who are like really interested in upholding the old values, and that there are more what we might call liberal types who are really interested in sort of tearing down the old and bringing in the new. And what I propose is that what I think would be helpful would be to bring that dynamic more onto the micro level, more into like how do I create more spaces of intimacy with people who are other than me, people who are nuanced and different than me? How do I bring down this little micro level of my own belief system? You don't have to tear down everything all at once in one fell swoop. How do we create moments of intimacy where we can, because my opinions on COVID are like super nuanced and fluxing and shifting all the time, and they're connected to my feelings, and I'm seeking for, I want to hear like the best knowledge out there, but I know that a lot of the things that people are talking about, opinions that are being shared, aren't really like necessarily based on fact. They're based on emotion. They're based on like inner sense of security. All of like so many different things can come into it, and I'm just not interested in having a conversation at like the banner level, at the like headline level. It's just so like, it's like, how do I get human with somebody else who has a really different opinion?
There's something that you were saying earlier where you were saying, well, how can I create these moments of intimacy? How can I create these experiences? Maybe we shift that a little bit. How can we enter them? There's lots of the little pockets of intimacy and connection all over the world. How can you consciously push past your boundaries and your fears and enter existing states of intimacy in the world? Because if we're all creating something, creating that state of intimacy, we kind of are creating these individual bubbles for ourselves. Like, come into mine, but no, come into mine. But what if we can just push past all of that and be like, I'm just going to step in. And I think that's what I'm learning most about, just even my line of work, is how to get individuals to step in to an, like, imagine intimacy all around the world in the ether, like love and energy and oxygen, whatever. Imagine the intimacy is right there with it. And in order to access it and step into it, you don't have to push past everything, Why wait to create a safe container for yourself and try and find some sort of safety that already exists? Trust in the world that we live in a little bit more. I mean, there's a lot of news and a lot of information coming out, and like you said, you'd go in by feeling. Maybe you can tune into that a little bit more. Maybe we can all benefit from tuning into that a little bit more and finding these little spaces of intimacy that already coexist. I mean, you talk about nature a lot and how your connection with nature is very intimate, with the trees, with the land that already exists. You just step into it whenever you need to consciously experience that sense of connectedness. You just go out and you detach from your experience and your beliefs and everything and just reset and go back into that state. You didn't create anything, you didn't change anything.
Yeah, I think there's something really genius about that sort of perspective, in that it's very efficient to just step into what's already there. Like just acknowledge that life is sort of perfect as it already is, and a sort of like remembrance and finding what we're looking for without needing to do this sort of Western view of manufacture something new because we're lacking, but it's more of this like falling back into the remembrance of what already exists. And it's like the cosmos is infinite. How can what we're desiring and longing for not already be out there somewhere?
I mean, breathing is a very intimate thing. When I teach little kids how to meditate, I always get them to imagine like a tiny little plant on the other side of the world. And then we talk about that exchange of prana, that exchange of data, that exchange of breath, where even just, okay, you're breathing out carbon dioxide, breathing in oxygen. And this little plant on the other side of the world is breathing out oxygen and breathing in carbon dioxide. You rely on each other. You breathe together. You stop breathing, it stops breathing. It stops breathing, you stop breathing. You already have an intimate connection at a very base level of your experience of life just by breathing. When I elevate that to elder students, teenagers, we talk about the data that's being exchanged there. Like, what's on your mind? Imagine your physical breath carrying data from your inner world to the outer one, and the trees are absorbing all of that data, and then they're recycling it, and you're exchanging knowledge now through breath. Communication is occurring. Is that not an intimate connection with the world and the world that we live in? You need not create nothing. You need not feel anything. You need not push any boundary. You just breathe. It's a starting place, especially when working with people with trauma. We don't necessarily have that capacity or understanding of what intimacy is, or where intimacy is limited to human connection. How about we take it a step further back? Go right down to the basics. Intimacy with your food. And even the term or the word intimacy, we often mistake as that, loving connection, that closeness. But we often restrict it to people and other beings that are like us. When we can have it just with every single breath. Whenever you need a moment of intimacy, you just got to think that tiny little plant on the other side of the world, like, I got you, you got me, as the base level experience of human life or the earth. It exists in that delicate balance, and balance itself is an intimate relationship. It's a dance.
I like how originally Scott was talking about creation and brought it back to intimacy. And I'm thinking of, I think the book's Erotic Ecology. I'm forgetting the German professor's name, but basically painting this picture of how intimacy and closeness is really all about creativity. Like first you enter an intimate encounter with humans when you make love, and then baby gets born. Like, but plants and food, like everything is about, you create this sort of intimacy and closeness, and out of that new life gets birthed. Like that's how nature functions. I'm just touched by this thing of like, actually like the first step of creating anything new culture, new idea, new project is like just about getting close and safe with someone or something to begin with.
In meditation classes. Sorry, Scott, go on.
And what's been kind of bouncing around for me, okay, I want to take what you just said and connect it with something else we were talking about. We were talking about, briefly talked about queerness a little bit. And okay, so you just brought up like getting safe enough to create something new, like getting in contact with something new. And for me, voyaging into the unknown, if we're talking culturally, it's about noticing where the edges of culture are, like the sort of the comfort zone of my culture and my comfort zone and others' comfort zones, and just recognizing that that's sort of like the what culture tolerates is about comfort zones, like individual comfort zones and collective comfort zones. And that's something, I mean, I've never had a boyfriend, but like I've been in this questioning mode for like a long time, and I'm not really even compelled to act on any the impulses I have, but I am compelled to be like on the edge of question, like what is this about? And I've been taking just the concept of queerness out of the box for myself, if it even has a box to begin with. And I my experience is that for me, like the experience of queerness, or like, has a lot to do with like the discovery journey, my discovery journey of like what is possible as a human, what is possible for human culture, and sort of and navigating to places which may feel slightly uncomfortable within myself, scary, and just moving there, and not necessarily not fighting at that point, not fighting to expand my edges or other people's edges, but being there and being in presence and noticing like how the edges can sort of expand, even just with my breath, even just with being there, or placing my attention on the edge. And so I just wanted to open that up. And we can talk about queerness or whatever, but I think I don't know actually where to go from here. Maybe it's more about queerness, maybe it's more about this experience of like navigating discomfort and presence. But yeah,
I could step in there. I mean, and speaking from my own queer journey of it feels very much like going to this edge. I mean, I had a pretty prolific romantic love life for most of my 20s, engaging heterosexually, and the queerness like really emerged more in this like deep edge psychological work, like at first doing a vision quest, and a whole bunch of dreams that were coming up, that were like mysteriously pointing towards this sort of repressed, marginalized queer aspect of myself. And it took some years to unpack, and then again in a deep psychological, psychedelic journey, where I removed a big piece of trauma, integrated a big piece of trauma, and realized underneath this queer piece and some work I did with a shaman, like it was kind of on the edge, the farthest edge I could go with my psyche is where it started to emerge. And where am I going with this? So it's for me, it feels like just going into this unknown, unscripted way of how I'm supposed to relate. Like I grew up in a culture that pointed towards heteronormativity and mononormativity as the way, and my body is enough heteronormative to be able to engage with that, but some part of my deep psyche was not able to feel fully authentic without honoring this queer piece. And sort of some of my reflections on that have been like there's a level of sexuality about it, but it's more about like how erotic creative energy like flows through my system and who I can share that erotic with energy with to create. There's not necessarily sexual, like, and the sexual piece sort of feels like needing to integrate the physical vessel, and there's learning that comes, but it's more like understanding how these like more archetypical powers of like erotic creative life force like flow through me, and the queerness like creates a different channel for it to flow. And I feel like I have way more potential to create through exploring the queerness. I'm not sure if I'm quite getting this out right, but it's like I feel like it's like rewiring my creative vessel as a human with a new wiring channel that sort of wasn't available when I was only in the heteronormative way of expressing. And I feel like in the world that we're living in, which is full of complex, wicked problems, environmentally, socially, finding new ways to allow our creative or erotic energy to flow through our beings and co-create with others is extremely useful. And I think it's no surprise that like queerness is becoming much more accepted. It's like trans awareness is much higher. Like the gay kids, this is what I've been hearing in high school, like instead of being like the outcasts are now like the cool kids. Like in Nelson, it's like it seems like almost all the kids that I know are exploring their gender queerness or like not defining what their sexuality is. And there's a big culture to like really support and accept that, particularly in this alternative town I live in. So I think there's some sort of cultural creative genius emerging through queerness that's fitting outside the scripted box of heteronormativity. That's been the main way of erotic co-creation for almost all of Western culture.
Well,
Modern Western culture.
Queerness just made sense to me. I mean, from the thing that got me about meditation when I really understood it was I'm existing as a creator, experiencing creation. That get to that state of stillness is when one resonates with that. Anything you experience, whether it's the world through your 5 physical senses, whether it's a thought, feeling, or sensation, all of these things are creations, and you are sitting in a state of a creator experiencing them. And the reason why a lot of people fear being queer is not because it is the whole idea of stepping into the unknown comes from the fact that as a queer person, you're learning from an innate truth, a truth that's within. And the reason why it's so hard to step in it into the physical world is because that truth doesn't exist out here. You have to bring it, which is why there's so much fierceness and energy that comes with the whole queer ideology. You are bringing creations to life, that whole sense of expanding, like the universe. We have to create into that expansion. The universe just doesn't expand. It creates as it expands. Mm-hmm. And that's how I've always saw my queerness. It's not how the world defines me. It's how it's the truth or the piece of the jigsaw puzzle that I bring out to the world that defines. And that's the label queer for me. It's like, it's just ambiguous. It's not finite. Like LGBT to me seems a little bit more finite, but then you get to Q and you're like, what the hell is this? I was like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to bring it out into the world. Like I dress the way I want to dress. I be who I want to be. I express myself in the most truest way possible. And I think a word that I associate with being queer is being true.
Mhm.
And whatever capacity that is, that's queer to the world, because the world that we live in, or the world that we're constructed in, relies upon these already existing belief systems and structures that are in place. As long as we know, which is why like science is also just as much as of a powerful tool, just as much it is also restrictive too. Unless we know for certain, it cannot be true, which is why it's so difficult being queer in the world, because it has to be so, like, people are trying to find a really finite way to express it and be it, when truly it's all about individuality and expressing your own truth. You can be in a straight heteronormative relationship but still be very queer if you just wear a beret or like a big top hat when you're navigating through the world. It's still a queer experience because it's your own expression. It doesn't matter what the sexuality and what you're doing. It's just stepping into your truth as an individual, as a creator within the experience of expanding creation. What are you bringing out? And that makes you queer because it's new, it's different, it's individual.
Yeah, thank you. I realized just as you're talking that for most of my life, I've sort of, in my own inner belief or understanding, conception, I've had the concept or the word of queerness sort of fused with the LGBT thing, and now I'm realizing that it's actually not a rule, that's the way it is. Oh, it's like, no, I could just be queer and be fully hetero, whatever. And what this brings up for me is, wow, this is just like, this way of defining it is just so similar to just the idea of being a cultural creator. I mean, just being different, just being, like being an innovator, being a creator, being creative, being artistic, being
true. Don't consider that. One thing I learned very quickly is to not consider being true being different, to not equate your truth to difference, to equate your truth as contribution instead.
Yes, and for me, inside, just as I use the word queer, for me, in my inner experience, where I go is that the impulses that I would might label as queer or might consider queer, like necessarily, like they take me to the edge of my own comfort zone, and that the edge of my comfort zone may be way beyond what the edge of another person's comfort zone is, or like culture's comfort zone. And so like necessarily, like there's something about sort of, and maybe it's connected to the hero's journey too, it's just like going into the unknown, going far away from what is considered normal, and then finding a way to bring it back as a gift. And I would say that is so I want to yes and what you were saying, and saying that that's a process too, of going and like being with my feelings, being with whatever shame I might have for feeling different, or just fear of knowing like what I have might disrupt things, and the reaction that might cause, and that for no person experiencing initiation, a kind of authentic initiation into adulthood, or some kind of one of their gifts, no person is sort of guaranteed that, acceptance, and that there's like an art to how I show up for myself in that process, and then how culture shows up for me in that process. And so it's like, and so that's part of my interest, is like, how do I be that which already is the culture? How do I be the intimacy already, experience the intimacy that is already there, and create the context for more of it to exist for others, for myself, so that there's less, it's more safe to go into that sort of queer discovery journey in the future.
Highlights my early experiences when I started embracing more of my individuality, my truth, my queerness, for lack of a better term. I started realizing, and I was looking for safer pockets to exist in. And I realized ultimately, when it becomes to becoming queer or being queer, you are bringing something into the world that doesn't exist. I mean, how can one accept you if they can't see you? How can you find those pockets of intimacy when you don't know how to step into them as your truth? You got to wait until it's completely safe and then present something brand new, which to me is counterintuitive as well, because you're stepping into a community that's, yes, we're all welcoming, we're all open, we embrace each other. Then I rock in and I've got this big kind of energy of like, whoa, this is too much for us. Wait a minute, I thought this was a safe space. Here's me thinking. And so what I realized is, being queer and delving into that realm of my psyche, is I'm going to present myself fully. I'm going to charge my body like an electromagnet on truth. And for a little while, it's going to repel a lot of illusion that doesn't resonate with it. But as I continue forward, I'm going to start attracting and bringing in more truth. I've probably never been more queer than I have in the last probably year. And somehow I ended up in my first relationship, ended up having the time of my life here when I came back to Nelson, connecting and going to all these different places. I wrote a book. I did all these different things because I realized, oh wait, I've just got to keep bringing stuff out and presenting. I've got to contribute to this expanding universe. Otherwise, I'm just going to be existing within the whatever is already created. I can choose to either exist as the creation, as the body, or choose to exist as the creator. Now, that's not some sort of high and mighty version of self that I've developed. It's just like, oh wait, I have the ability. I can breathe. I can move. My body itself is evolving so that I can do more and create more. But creating to serve something that already is created kind of seems a little bit backwards. But creating things for me to step into, and creating a life for myself to step into, and a world that I want to contribute to, I want to contribute to my part of the universe's expansion. I want to expand it in that way. So I'm going to create in that way. Anybody want to follow me or join me, or is anyone else creating in that way? I can help. I think it's finding your way. And this is what I learned as well with the physical senses, the two ways that they operate. Yes, we absorb a lot of experience through our 5 physical senses, but we also create a lot of experience with them too, and navigating them to more fulfilling experiences, teaching our bodies like, yeah, this is a safe, healthy place for you to completely utilize and be in the sensory experience of life without delving into thought or feeling. And in order to do that, one needs to see themselves as the truest version that they feel within. Queerness to me has never been about being gay or being anything about my sexuality. I think it's just a full form of expression, completely unfiltered. If more of us stepped into that, I think it'd be a wonderful place.
What's kind of been coming out for me as you spoke, and I think you gave one potential solution at the end there with the embody piece, but something about like it takes a lot of resource or like capacity to be existing outside the edge of what's known, like going out into the unsafe place, going out to the edge, like going into the underworld, going to outer space. I mean, look at what's going on with these like 3 billionaires right now. Like it takes billionaires to go out to the very edge of the planet to be able to exist there safely. And so there's a curiosity of like how to allow that to happen. Like you got a really healthy family upbringing. You like were able to have experiences that like were really supportive to you to be able to exist at the edge and like live in your truth and authenticity with power and confidence and strength. Which it's like I'm curious about how to like make that more accessible, because like the culture creates a lot of safety and security where people can exist, but then they get trapped in that, so they can't go to the edge, or they go to the edge and they might become really under-resourced. You know, too much drug use or psychotic breaks, or these ways of like not being able to exist in a grounded way, which I see common. So it's like there's this curiosity of like, how do you stay to the edge and be safe when inherently it's a really dangerous thing? But like, where's the proper amount of resource to actually survive there, and then come back with your gifts?
That's where speaking to trans people transformed my life. They taught me how to be more open and be more bold with who I am. I mean, I don't think I've experienced or heard of more of a marginalized individual than a trans person, or a trans person of color, for instance. And listening to their stories and listening to, it literally came down to a life and death choice for many of them. Do I choose to be alive, or I'm gonna die trying? And then that's a very bold move, but that's also a very scary move. But then that's where, you know, we have this community, right, LGBT, just before queer, that's pushing boundaries, massive boundaries, helping the young generation be a little bit more, you know, less rigid with their identity, so they can really truly step into the truth when they understand it. And that's the power. I mean, speaking to trans people, I think, is a communication or conversation that needs to happen more and more. We need to have more trans representation in all industries, because talk about being bold and open and being out in the world. And even think back to like ancient India, all the stories and folk tales, even the gods were, you know, different genders, molding themselves, changing themselves into different ways of being and existing. Very bold, natural statement. And then on the other hand of it, you can, if you want, like for me, when young people ask me like how to be more confident, how to be more themselves, I was like, well, do what I did. Start dancing in the dark. Turn all the lights off, put your earphones on, and just start expressing yourself. Oh, is that too much? No worries. Sit back in contemplation and do it in your mind. When I was younger, I wasn't allowed to swear or scream. But when I sat in meditation, I was the loudest person I could be. I screamed, I yelled, I did everything that I couldn't do in life. And then slowly that started turning into expressing myself within. And then I started looking at that version. I was talking to you about this last night. I started looking and paying more attention to that person that I was within, that was expressing himself and dancing within their own mind. And then with the lights off, I started doing that within my own room, within my own dark space. I externalized the internal world and recreated it physically in the dark. Slowly but surely, I started dancing with my shadow, put a little light on, and started learning from my shadow a version of myself that's a little bit safer to approach. Next thing you know, I'm now dancing just in the light, towards the light that's causing the shadow. Then a mirror. Then from the mirror, go to maybe start going to a club and start dancing that way. Too much, scale it back, go back to the mirror, get more comfortable seeing yourself. And like slowly bringing it out. I think there's a definitely, like people see me now and they're like, oh, you're very bold, you're very out there. It's like, it took me a lot of practicing and learning from myself, a lot of wrong turns. I did get bullied a lot and I did get picked on and so much stuff happened. But I think that's, and I hate to be a broken record, but the power of meditation is like, it just allowed me to drop into that space and think, how can I express this truth safely in the world? And that's the beauty of having these finite bodies that are fragile, that can be bruised, is that it'll teach you, okay, there's a world that you're existing in, there's a level of communication that you need to adopt in order to present it. Sure, I can shout from the rooftops, but do I necessarily want to be an activist? Do I feel like I'm an activist? No, it's not part of who I am. I enjoy a very peaceful environment. I enjoy being more kind of in, like, let's have a conversation around the dinner table. But each time I did that, the more I learned for myself, my level of intelligence also increased. My understanding of self also increased. So I was able to, rather than say like, this is how the world should be, I got firm and I got grounded and I understood how to say, this is how I am or who I am, because no one can question that. You stand affirmed in it, You can question your beliefs, you can question what you're creating, but really it's very hard to question someone's truth of who they are as an individual. Just food for thought.
I was about a year and a half ago in a workshop where we were exploring identity, exploring, I don't think I need to give the full backstory, but suffice it to say that I was realizing in this workshop just how privileged I am. Of course, I already know that. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's not obvious, but I've been aware of that, and this was making me even more aware. And I was exploring, what aspects of my identity are like marginalized, if any, or are like sort of difficult to bring forward into the world. And okay, no, it's easy for me to be a white. It's easy for me to be male in this current culture. It's easy for me to like. These are not aspects of my identity which may like draw the chagrin of people, or may, I can hide out safely in most spaces in culture. And then it hit me. I use the word wizard. I'm a wizard, and this is like, and I was really nervous to say that, but at that time that was like the most real thing that I could say. I'm a wizard. Like, I've got capacities that I hide. I've got the ability to create out of nothing, to be unknown. Like I'm comfortable being unknown and being in that place, and not having an opinion about something, not needing to have an opinion, and through my presence, creating or invoking the possibility of a totally different kind of culture, totally different. And so I'm sitting here and wondering, is my experience of being a wizard the same as what we're talking about here about queerness, and the same about this journey,
I would say so. 100%.
And I'm still not sure I want to like claim queer, because I'm aware that like, as much as we're talking about like in this context of three, we can define this word for ourselves as that. My fear is that this is not just my word in a way. Like, it can be my word for me, but if I'm like out there in the world being like queer, like, it's also not that people will really get wizard either, but it's not like necessarily going to land as like. And even like, I have a question, like, do I even need a word? Do I even need to be out in that way? It's more like, can it just be through my actions and through my being?
Yeah. There's a couple of things there. It's like, I think there's a sort of, I don't know, like one essence of queerness, what you just truth. I often call it authenticity for myself. And like, I feel like wizard is one representation of this essence of that truth, or authenticity, or something else you might need to call it. I do have a warning, which is a broader cultural warning around using the word queer to describe this sort of authentic expression or truth, in a way, just because queer people in the traditional sense of either sexually diverse or gender diverse have been marginalized for a very long time, and I feel like those ones are the ones who have claim to the word queer, and it distinguishes them different from somebody else who's showing up authentically in culture but isn't expressing homosexuality or some sort of gender queerness. So I think it's a bit it can be harmful to claim that word if one's not expressing that way. But I think we're talking about something bigger, something different in this conversation that's, I think, accessible to everybody, no matter what their sexual or gender expression, around like a deeply authentic expression that's outside the culturally constructed ways of creating.
Right.
I think here we're using the word queer more as a verb than a noun. I think adopting the word queer as a noun is very different to adopting the word queer as a verb.
Can you use it in a sentence as a verb?
As a verb? Yeah, I'm stepping into my queer. I'm going out into my queer. I'm stepping in. You know, there's moments I'll be walking down the street and the identity of queer just doesn't even get expressed. It doesn't feel like it's there. I see myself as queer, but I also see myself as many other things too. And that's the beauty of being queer as the verb, is I can drop into being gay, I can drop into feeling straight, I can drop into being bi. There's all these that's what I love about the term, is it's so, you can adopt it as a noun by all means, but as a noun, I think it also restricts it too. And that's the beauty reason why I adopted that term, is because for me, it seems a little bit more open. It seems a little bit less rigid. Like, for example, you can see a straight, cis, white male walking down the street, but then stick eyeliner on him, all of a sudden he's queer. And that's kind of me seeing it as the verb. But would that individual themselves identify as queer because of that, or are they just expressing themselves? And I think, to me, I would like to see the whole spectrum of labels abolished, personally. Let's just individually express ourselves as people, but then people need representation and some sort of identity too in this world that we live in. But I've always just thought fluid is something that I often get described as a lot.
I mean, the whole identity thing too is like, well, one of the places that I've received training in, so there's this, one of the organizational contexts called possibility management, and one of the things that we talk about is just the ego. We use the word box, and that's okay. The box, another word for that is identity or worldview, and that's when we're children, when we're growing up, we are primarily in this mode of defensive learning. We are primarily concerned with our survival, and everything we do sort of is about preserving our own identity. I mean, preserving ourselves as physically autonomous, healthy living beings, but then also at an identity level, preserving the identity itself. And the proposal is that once we come to a kind of stage where we are capable of experiencing initiation into adulthood, the identity and the physical self, the emotional self, they don't have to, they become unfused in a way. And I can regard from within, from my being, I can regard my identity as just one form of identity, and it can die, and I can step into a new identity as an adult. And so this I see as something that all humans are capable of, like we're born to be that way. And I'm feeling fear because I think I lost a thread of like why I launched into this. It was based on something you said.
Fluidity.
Say again.
Fluidity. Being fluid.
Yeah, being fluid. Well, Oh yeah, you were talking about abolishing, like
Labels.
in one way you have a desire to abolish these labels, and it's like oh, like I'd actually love that, because on one hand I'd love that because it's not about identity at a certain, like what I'm interested in is living in an adult culture with other adults who are responsible and who are living their lives and their gifts full out and contributing to creating a sustainable culture. You know, I'd like less trash on the ground. I'd like to create and there's, at the level of identity, at the level of preference, at the level, like there's so many small conflicts we get into that sort of in the modern world we let these things sort of just destroy any possibility that collaboration might be a thing that can happen. And so yeah, there's a tension I notice between like fighting for the liberty to and the freedom in culture to explore this and express this as in as many like identity in as many diverse ways as possible, and then kind of getting beyond that to working together. And I'm not suggesting that there's a simple way to do that, and I guess I just wanted to bring that up and acknowledge that it's this meta conversation too.
It's like, I find it interesting there of like where labels fit into, like you gave a little map there of like maybe the big first part of life for childhood and adolescence is developing a box, a strong enough box, and then the second half where you have created a strong enough box to detach from it and use the box as a tool instead of identify with the box. And I feel like there's something useful about labels in like box construction, which is an essential part of the stage of development to get to a place where you can be more fluid without needing to identify the box. And culturally, it's really useful to communicate around like how are we building boxes, but it's like that's in service of eventually leaving the box. But we need to start by building the box. We need to start by having labels before we can like not have labels.
On the other side of that coin, growing up being not quite English enough, not quite Indian enough, not quite Punjabi enough, not quite. So any label I did try and adopt, I wasn't allowed to fully adopt it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, to hell with your labels, I create my own.
Right.
So now I don't live in one. I don't live in under anyone. People define me. People try and define me. Every time I speak to people, they're like, you're so this, and so this. I was like, to you, I am. That's how you define me, and that's how you see me. But in my element, like, as long as I can be happily embracing myself, you can call me whatever you want. I think the whole idea, like even labels, I think is the reason why we have trash on the street. Like, for example, if there's a doctor walking down the street and there's a trash collector walking down the street, but the doctor gets to the can that's lying on the pavement first, who do you think's really going to pick it up? Well, the doctor, but no, that's the job for the trash collector right behind me. And it's because of those labels, and they restrict our behaviors and restrict the way we operate in the world personally. And these, I personally would have loved to be identified as fully English or fully Indian or fully aspect of any aspect of who I am in my identity. But that's all been stripped away. That's all been very ambiguous from me from day one. So I've never really known how to identify with a label. I think there's a whole community of us where no label fits because we've tried them all on and they're like, well, it's not quite right. It doesn't quite fit. And then I came upon queer and I was like, oh, well, this one doesn't even have a clear definition. I'll stick with this one because there's no definition to it. Right. It's really just an expression. And I've never seen it as a noun. I've never seen it as a label that I adopt. And I just see it as equates to being human.
And yes, and like as we've been exploring, it's like, you know, different people have different understandings of it, and so yeah, it's just this open question for me. It's like again, I still don't really want to go around just like calling myself a wizard, because I'm like, it holds significance for me, but it's like, what, I don't know, it doesn't really seem, I don't feel like it's really affirming in some way in the public sphere. Like, I don't think I'm like, it doesn't really give me anything to just publicly announce it necessarily, other than creating the distinction of who I am. And maybe there's, but there's also so many different, there's also preconceptions as to like what a wizard is from other people. And it's like, I don't really want I don't want to basically be like bringing up other people's reactions of like, oh, this guy's just in fantasy or something like that. So it's how to, and so both those labels, queer and wizard, are just sort of like, they don't quite fit for me. And I'm in this questioning of like, do I need to find that ultimate label, or is it just like, okay, I'm going to be Scott, but then I risk, just be, I'm not using the tool of a label to distinguish myself so much. I'm probably going to just be, experienced by others as heteronormative white male, which I am. But I'm more than that too. So anyway.
I've got a couple of thoughts about this. Like, one is like just around the wizard thing. Like, maybe it's just the deeper essence of the wizard not to go around advertising that you're a wizard. Like, people don't set up shop and like, wizard Scott East, like, come like buy my potions, whatever. Like, wizards are more like advisors for the king, sort of like working in the background. Like, they don't advertise, they just like show up and do their wizardly work. Like, Gandalf's not running around advertising, he just kind of shows up where he's needed. Like, anyway, just a guess of maybe what a wizard is like, you don't tell people you're a wizard if you're a wizard. That's just like what wizards do. Thought one. Thought two is just maybe amplifying what you're sharing of using queer as a verb instead of a noun, but like maybe all labels are just processes. It's like, if we took any label and stopped thinking that it's a static thing, like you're a wizard, you're a possibility manager, you're a meditation teacher, you're Scott even, it's like all these things are just processes, and there's no actual staticness behind any of the labels that we use. Just having a small frame of anything that we label is just a process that's also emergent, that is not a finite thing. Like, a doctor is not one thing. A doctor, there's millions of doctors doing doctoring in millions of ways, and it doesn't really necessarily define you. It might have like some sort of vibrational quality, like it's got an essence that can help understand where it can be in relationship to other things in the universe, and provide some sort of generative creativity. But it's never really just one thing.
And labels are good for service. Like, if you're in service, so you can identify, like you said, I'm a meditation teacher. Guess what you're going to come to me for? Those are valuable. And I think when you own a label like that, or when you create a label like that, it's definitive of what you can offer and bring into the world, what you can create into the world. A doctor can create healing, for example. A queer person can ...
Yeah.
A wizard can ...
And a trash collector can do more than just collect trash. I mean, that role, if a person identifies as that role, then maybe that's all that they can do. But there's something about, and we're sort of in the last few minutes before I know we have to end this, but I think there's a larger conversation here around sort of who decides, really. Because the way that the world, sort of the operating system of modern culture, has been constructed, there are, it is easier to, the path of least resistance might be taking that job of the trash collector that is being offered, taking that role on and identifying as that. And there's something about creating from the inside out.
Mm.
So to create, so as a meditation teacher, I don't think probably anybody made a job posting and said meditation teacher wanted, and then Terry, and then you're like, well, maybe I'll follow, so maybe I'll just like show up for the job interview. I worked at Sears for a year, so I think that qualifies me to be a meditation teacher. I hope that they hire me.
Probably does, actually, the patience you need to deal with that.
Yeah, probably.
Attention.
So I think there's something about like maybe a larger conversation around like how do we more and more create the cultural context that is to that will support people to grow out of those roles or out of the mode of just
It comes from within. Like when people often hear meditation teachers, I think I'm going to show up in robes and a turban, and really I'm just showing up in my skinny jeans and a blazer with a glass and like swearing and doing all sorts of funky stuff. And then I just define the role for myself. Then now it becomes, oh, I want Terry as my meditation teacher, as opposed to a generic term. Specialist, keywords, like, there's Harry Potter, Merlin, Gandalf was the other one. The key characters are all under this one label, but they identify individually. They stand out as individuals under this umbrella term. And that's how I see queerness. It's just this umbrella term. And then you've got all these key individuals that come out of it. Names, individuals.
Some people would probably prefer if you showed up in a turban with sitting on a tiger fur or something like that. Like be more comfortable for them.
Yeah. And ultimately, I always think the label should come second to you. Everything, your creator, everything else is a creation. The creation comes second to the creator.
I get curious, and like, is there like a deeper, like ultimate label that can like maybe even creator, like is like identifying as creator? It's like there's this potential to have a label that has the most potential or like sums up the like most core truth. This is where my curiosity is, like how to invite people into like the deepest, truest label that's accessible.
I think that's the journey that doesn't get expressed on the outside, is it? And I think it's something that you have to go within and then try your best to bring it out.
Yeah, I think both ends. It's like it needs to have an external embodied expression somewhere.
And I will say, what this is sort of sparking for me is, I mean, this is part of where I think possibility management shines, is there's a lot of different exercises where you can get into like pairs or groups of 3 and then really hold space for one another to go deep and to bring from the deepest part of the inside out, to bring from the unknown parts of myself, from my inner being out into the world and voice it, and so I mean, as we're wrapping this up now, maybe that's something we could do if you were to come back at some point to another podcast, Terry. Maybe we could even like in the podcast do something like that and actually in real time explore what is the deeper truth of each of our beings. Because and maybe even emerge differently at the end of the podcast at an identity level than at the beginning when we enter.
So we'll just transcend at the end of the podcast. Bye.
Maybe you will. I don't know. I don't really believe in enlightenment, but that's maybe
step into your queer and find out.
This is I really, thank you both. I think there's definitely a magic that I feel in touch with here, having been on this journey, in this conversation with you both.
Because you're a wizard.
Maybe I've been bringing that magic. Thank you, and maybe it's just a space of intimacy that we all joined into rather than created. It's already here.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Love you too. Yeah. Okay.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.